Hello friends, welcome back. And now I would be taking you towards concept of organizational life cycle, where we are referring to 2 3 important researches and research papers specifically. Organizational life cycle concept has been discussed by many important authors around the world in the field of strategy and otherwise as well. They have contributed a lot on this subject. Textbooks do not talk much about it, but then these authors, they have written books in one or the other form. They have contributed a lot and they are being continuously referred by the textbooks. So I definitely would request you to go into the details of the references which we are giving to you. But here this concept is very important for us to understand. You see, when I said that there is a long term vision, there is a long term strategy. Long term strategy can only be there and a vision can only be achieved if you have a longer life, because long term means long term. And then you have to have specific kinds of specific kind of a business vision and mission to collate with that. Mission is not a shorter term kind of a thing. But then we have seen that business environment has changed and several kinds of industries, they have very short span also. So definitely everything has to be measured or understood on the basis of a life cycle span. That is what authors have been talking about. It is very interesting. Let us see. But before that, just try and collate your life cycle span with an individual's life cycle span. One takes birth, goes up, may stumble down, may go up, may stagnate, may go up further, may decline and may vanish, or may be rejuvenated, or may vanish at the end of the day. This does not happen with humans, of course, because humans, they have a particular kind of a life, and human life is more predictable in terms of, if someone is healthy and going well, steady, then also after a particular kind of an age would take that human body away. So that is a precise life cycle. If someone is not healthy, then if you are keeping good medical support to the person, definitely person would saturate someday and then the body would decline. And if this person is healthy, no medical support is there, then the sharp decline may also come. It is unfortunate, but it happens. But when we say that, okay, that is fine, but in organizations several people are involved, several environmental factors are involved. Organizations are much beyond the lifespan of an individual can think. Basically, that is why there are several organizations who say that they are more than 100 years of age. I always talk about IIT Roorkee, which is almost 177, 178 year is running. So 178 years, huge. So you see, sometimes I probably would not be here at that time, but then definitely in next 2 decades, the people who would be here would be talking about the 200th year they would be celebrating as far as the IIT Roorkee's existence go. So organizational life cycle or lifespan is a very long kind of a thing basically. And let us see what authors talk about. So here we are referring to Cohen and Kendall and McCarthy, corporate life cycles and evolution of management. They actually collated both of these things and it was published in Management Decision, a good publication. So corporations, and the authors say that corporations like products go through various stages of development from birth to maturity to decline. We just saw that. Different researchers proposed models of corporate development describing the changes an organization faces as it evolves. The changes, what changes can organization face basically in terms of its value chain partners, in terms of the customers, number of customers, in terms of if you consider employees as also as value chain partners, suppliers, they are definitely value chain partners. So people who are associated with the organization strengthen the organization. If the number of people or the associate number of people is growing, or the association of people with the organization is getting deeper, organization is growing, the span is going ahead. It is a very simplistic version when we talk about organizational life cycle. But then let us see what authors have to say. So to be successful, organizations must be able to adapt rapidly to significant environmental changes. Flexible you are, healthy you are, you adapt the environment well, you acclimatize yourself with the coming changes, We all know that when we go to hilly areas and we do not belong to hilly areas, we take a day to acclimatize, and if we are healthy from, our immune system is strong, and you would have heard this word too much in past 3-4 years, immunity. If you are strong and you are flexible, you can adapt well, then definitely you would remain healthy. A corporation's business strategy, structure and goals usually differ in each stage of the cycle. Of course, it has to. If you have launched your organization, basically, you have to have that vigor, that energy. You have to work hard on product development, innovation. You have to work hard on bringing people on board, and you have to work hard on growing actually. So, everything, business strategy, structure and goals usually differ in each stage of the cycle. The organization must be managed by executives with the skills to cope with the demands of each stage of corporate development and so on. One of my sessions I talked about Mr. Narayan Murthy, and I referred to his interview, and we talked about how he referred to the vision of his organization, but then he talked about execution stages, how that vision would be achieved and so on. So when they came up with this organization, that is where they focused upon the specific business strategy which was required, the structure which was required, and the goals they had to achieve. The classic example of mismatch between a corporate life cycle and management style is the entrepreneur whose business grows beyond his management abilities. Market has responded well, your product has been received well, but somehow you are unable to manage the show, what is to be done. In today's era, I have seen that in many of such cases, people sell off their companies, they merge with large organizations and get benefited out of that. That is a simplistic step which one can take, but then if you want that to grow, somehow you want those fruits to, yourself want to bear those fruits, you want to experience the success, you want to taste that success, and you want to grow with the organization. What is to be done? You yourself want that organization to be handed over by you to someone someday. So what would you do basically, and let us see what authors talk about. And here authors are referring to Chandler. In 1962, Chandler published a study, Strategy and Structure, a very important study. I would definitely want you to refer to this. You can refer to this paper on Google Scholar, you can go to the references, and then you can refer to the study as well. So, Strategy and Structure, which reviewed how 4 well known companies evolved in the face of common environmental conditions and uncertainties. He monitored those companies. Chandler's primary point was that there is a relatively uniform set of developmental stages of a company's change over time. Relatively uniform set of developmental stages. So, he tried to identify uniformity in different kinds of companies on a life cycle graph or a structure. These stages are associated with an organization's strategy, how they are executing that, how they are crafting those strategies, and then by this time you would have started visualizing what we have discussed in our preceding sessions. In essence, he hypothesized that structure follows strategy. Strategy is long term, structure can be contemporary, structure has to be flexible enough to collate itself with the strategy, and we have talked about that earlier as well. He pointed to 5 distinct stages of corporate development. Now, this is interesting, please mark this and try to visualize the examples around these. I would also be trying to extend some examples. Very small firm expands volume. For example, you started a restaurant in somewhere in some city, and then expanding volume of sales as far as things are working well for you. One function, one area, geographic expansion. So, you are just focusing upon the kind of food you are going for. Probably McDonald's would have started like that. You may go to the history also, and there are several kinds of Indian chains which started like that. Departmental structure with headquarters and field units, that is vertical integration. So you are actually going by definitely expansion. Central office and multi-departmental structure, you are going for diversification basically, you are diversifying your businesses, you are diversifying in terms of your products and businesses and so on, and you are creating different identities to different kinds of businesses and so on. Multi-divisional structure, and you have several kinds of structure. You look into SBI for example, because we have been talking about this example at quite a length, and you would realize what I am talking about. I suggest you go to the history of SBI and you would realize what we are referring to here. So, that is what Chandler talks about as far as 5 distinct stages. Chandler's 5-stage model was later simplified by Thayen and Scott. People, as I said, people kept on contributing to this thought process. Scott combined stages 1 and 2 with 3 and 4. So, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that is very small firm, and one function, one area, he combined that, and departmental structure in central office, he combined that to create the following model, that is stage 1, small company with one or few functions performed by one manager, growth in volume, geographic coverage and through vertical integration leads to multi-departmental department enterprise with specialized managerial departments based on function diversification, which leads to multi-divisional enterprise with divisions based largely on product market relationships. It is very simple if you look into the logic of, you started with a product, and look at Netflix for example. Netflix started as a distribution system. They started distributing CDs or renting CDs or discs to their customers, and look at Netflix today. They are producing serials, they are producing movies, they are into so many things basically, and they are developing their own platforms, they are developing their own software as well, they have several kinds of IPs and so on. This is a popular example, that is why I put up that in front of you. For example, all the electronic companies, all the white good companies, electrical companies, electrical appliances companies, they went into this kind of a story if you will look into their history largely. For example, in India, Jaguar, starting from bathroom fittings or those kind of things basically, then bathtubs, and they extended the products and they went for different kinds of showers and tabs and so on, now entering into electrical appliances. And several kinds of such companies, they went for that. Hyundai is a huge conglomerate, the same story. LG is a big conglomerate starting from chemicals to automotives and so on, and why not Tatas? We have been referring to Tatas, and look into Tatas basically. So, several kinds of companies they went for these kind of things. Thien also reduces the 5 stages to 3. He retains Chandler's emphasis on structure as the key differentiating factor. Here Scott talks about basically combined stages 1 or 2 with 3 or 4 to create following model, which talks about small company with one or fewer functions performed by one manager, growth in volume, geographic coverage through vertical integration and diversification, and the emphasis is on product market relationship, and here he talks about structure itself. Thien. He describes 3 stages as follows: small and simple, 1 unit, 1 man show; 1 unit, functionally specialized group; large and complex, multi-unit, general office and decentralized divisions, retail chains like Big Bazaar or Spencer's or restaurant chains, adding on products and so on. So, you may think in terms of product market relationships or structure based kind of a thing basically. Some logic has to be given in terms of as far as when you are observing organizations through a life cycle span. But the most simplistic perspective which I want to extend in front of you, having read these intelligent authors, my take on that is that ultimately it depends upon the number you add in terms of your customers, your value chain partners, your employees. Or if that is not the question of number, that is not the measurement unit of your success basically, then largely for how long you have retained your value chain and your customers, adding on to your profitability, your growth. At the end of the day, some number is associated with your growth, either in terms of number of customers. If you are adding, definitely it would add to profitability. You have retained employees, retained customers, and multiple sales to one customers, even if it is a niche market, then also there is a number. So, there is a number, stockholders getting retained with you and adding on value to you basically, adding on to new stockholders, they are also part of value chain at some point of time. Your suppliers are continuously associated with you despite of whatever it comes, and you are adding on suppliers, basically you are increasing production, some number in terms of as far as growth. That is my addition to this complete thought process. So, another approach to the stages of organizational life cycles is proposed by Lipit and Schmid. They state that as a business goes through the stages of birth, youth, maturity, it faces a predictable series of organizational crises. Now, they are looking for what are the pitfalls. In each stage, management is confronted with different concerns and issues. Now let us see what are the concerns and issues. So at the birth, to create a new organization is the concern, to survive as a viable system is a concern, and the issues are what to risk, what to sacrifice. At the youth level, to gain stability is the concern, to gain reputation and develop pride is the concern, that is brand value is the concern, and issues are how to organize, how to review and evaluate. And then at the maturity level, maturity means when you are actually reaching to a place when number is not expanding somehow. You see, always try to think in those kind of terms. That is why every expression about the organizations is given in terms of numbers at large. You will look into several kinds of reports at Statista and different kinds of portals and different kinds of organizations which are actually measuring the success of organizations. For example, Fortune 500 list, there are several kinds of numbers which they are referring to. So maturity, to achieve uniqueness and adaptability, that is one concern, and to contribute to the society. The issues are whether and how to change and whether and how to share. So it is an interesting kind of presentation in terms of starting from birth, youth and maturity. Lipit and Schmid add a stage to the developmental process that has not been explicitly addressed in other models, birth. They also address the issue of decline by stating companies go into decline only because of inexcusable mismanagement or drastic changes in market demand or economic environment. If economic environment is so overwhelming that you are unable to cope up with that, then definitely one has to think about that. I remember many automotive majors cutting off their production and then vanishing off, many electrical appliances companies, many television companies. There was an era of black and white television companies in India, and the national level companies were doing exceptionally well, and I do not think many of those are still into business as of now. There were some automotive companies in an era which are not there anymore now, or they have transformed their complete entire business into some different kind of a business as of now. India had so many automotive companies and so on. So, see there were wristwatch companies, and there were shoe manufacturers, and there were pen manufacturers and whatnot. So, you see, and further the authors say that they also address the issue of decline by stating companies go into decline only because of inexcusable mismanagement. If you will go into the history, you would realize what we are referring to here. I refrain from discussing pitfalls and identifying those aspects by somehow naming very specific instances in leadership or mismanagement problems, but my suggestion is that you study organizations, and then I would try to bring up some examples on failures as well, which are explicit, which are there everywhere. So HMT watches is no more, Indian drugs and pharmaceuticals is no more, and there are some private companies which are not doing well. For example, Yamaha motorcycles, they lost on sales. Basically, Escorts motorcycles, I do not think they are manufacturing anymore. LML scooters, they discontinued their manufacturing and so on. There are several examples. So that is somehow, but if you go into the history, you would realize what we are talking of, and that is coming from Lipit and Schmid. Now there is an interesting paper on the website of BCG, and it talks about contracting corporate lifespan. This is adding to our information and our understanding. So in a research, it was found that public companies, and the details of the link is given at the bottom of the slide. So please try to visit this paper, it is a good paper, and for just for explaining the context, we have used some lines. So we are not copying that or not plagiarizing anything, no plagiarism is involved, and we apologize to the originators of this paper if somehow it's over the number of lines which we had to use, but these are very limited number of lines which we are referring to. So in a research, it was found that public companies are perishing sooner than ever before. That is what the paper says. Since 1970, the lifespan of companies as measured by the length of time that their shares are publicly traded has significantly decreased. Interesting thought, and that is what I was talking about, numbers. In fact, businesses are dying at a much younger age than people who run them. This is where we started our discussion. The lifespan of corporations has nearly halved over just 3 decades. Interestingly, most types of businesses in most industries are now dying younger. Only a few make it into their 50s and 60s. Very interesting thought, and because it is a large organization, they have been monitoring organizations for a number of years. That is how they talk about it, and let us see what the exhibits talk about. Now, these exhibits have been recreated from the exhibits which were shown in the paper and were made by BCG. Because of the copyright aspects, we did not take those pictures as it is. So, my team members, they have personally drafted this and recreated this exhibit on the basis of the exhibit shown in the paper. Reference is given at the bottom of the slide. bcg.com, publications 2015, strategy die another day, what leaders can do about the shrinking life expectancy of corporations. So, exhibit 1 says that companies average age at death in the US, that is what they have shown, and this has been recreated. So, this is the lifespan on the vertical axis, and these are the years. So, companies average age at death for 5-year periods leading up to a year shown in this graph, and as the slide said, the earlier slide said that it is decreasing. So, 60s to 40s, and average human life expectancy at birth in US is increasing. So, 70s to 80s, and that is how they are developing a parity here. Now, another addition which this paper extends is rising mortality risk. Companies do not just die younger, they are also more likely to perish at any point in time. Almost 1/10 of all public companies fail each year, a 4-fold increase since 1965. It's a longitudinal study they would have done. They would have scanned huge data basically, and that is how they have been expressing this paper. But it's an interesting thing, and these kind of studies add a lot of value to our knowledge. Please read this paper at length, and you would realize what we are talking about. So, the 5-year exit risk for public companies traded in US now stands at 32%, compared with the 5% risk they would have faced 50 years ago, and that is an important kind of an addition. And this recreated chart from the same paper, from the chart which they created, this recreated chart talks about 5-year company mortality risk by sector. Now, this yellow dot says consumer healthcare, that is 35.5% risk is there, 38.2 in case of IT companies highest, industrial goods 32.1, financial institutions 27.6, and energy and utilities 24.5. So, that is how the risk is increasing in terms of as far as the whole thing goes. Why do these statistics matters to leaders? That is the culmination of what the study says. Mortality risk grew relatively uniformly across all sectors of economy. Only the past decade saw a slight divergence in outcomes. Traditionally stable oligopolies such as the oil and gas industry recovered the most, while mortality remains high in more dynamic industries such as technology. There may be several reasons, but we are talking of organizational life cycle, and this paper is adding information to that, and we are trying to take clues from what Chandler said, what Schmid said, what Scott said, and so on, what Thayen said, what Lipit said, and what we are trying to understand in terms of numbers. So, collate everything and try to understand that how this paper is adding to that kind of a understanding which we are trying to develop. The paper further adds that neither scale nor experience is a safeguard. Mortality risk also grew for companies of all sizes and ages. While smaller companies have always faced greater risk, even the largest companies are now facing higher exit rates, maybe because of environmental forces, maybe because of objectives were not crafted well, maybe because the strategies were not crafted well, maybe because monitoring was not done well. There would have been several reasons, but everything is in terms of a life cycle span. A growth endurance trade-off. They observed a surprising relationship between revenue growth and mortality. Numbers again. While the fastest shrinking companies are most likely to perish, they are closely followed by fastest growers as well. That is, accelerated growth correlates with shorter lifespans, that is what they concluded, whereas companies with more moderate growth face the lowest risk. Sharper you rise, sharper you may fall, that is what they imply, as if the contraction of corporate lifespans on average diminishes long-term value creation. What can corporations do now to strengthen their long-term resilience without undermining performance? The lessons this paper is giving us is detect early warning signals, craft your objectives well, look into the environmental perspective well, cultural values should be there, values should hold the culture, culture should hold the value or stick to the values, and so on. Adapt your strategy to your environment, be flexible, that is what we were talking of. Run and reinvent, always keep on monitoring, aim for resilience on all time scales, but do not confuse persistence with performance. Renew governance model. That is what I wanted to imply when I was referring to organizational life cycle. I would be using this concept at many places in my detailed discussions when I would be referring to corporate level strategic choices, business level strategic choices, operations or functional level strategic choices, and so on. And I would also go to the extent of talking about stronger the vision, stronger the lifespan, depending upon what precision you create as far as the strategic steps goes, holding on to the vision through the cultural values and so on. I would be using several kinds of examples to tell you the stories of several kinds of successful organizations who have passed the test of time through and through, and we would be talking about the organizations which could not pass the endurance test and so on. Why they couldn't, we can talk endlessly on the failures of people, but we should be more focused upon the successes and the reasons for success in our lives, that those are the lessons which we should follow, that is the understanding which we should develop, that strengthens the aspect of that if your vision is directed towards purity, prosperity and opulence, which I am always emphasizing upon. So, if that is focused on prosperity and opulence around you, and mission is crafted out of that kind of a thought process, objectives focus upon achieving prosperity and opulence throughout the value chain, and goals are targeted towards specifically for your value chain partners and especially the customers or the beneficiaries, the main target, and prosperity and opulence still is there, then life cycle has to be longer. That is my individual understanding, can be debated, but definitely if you will try to look around, you would find that there is some context or gravity in what we are discussing here. I would be catching up back with you very soon with lots of understanding on, let us say, some generic forms of strategy, and I will make it more interesting for you, make it more precise for you in terms of as far as our subject understanding goes, and then we will try to conclude at the end of the day. My wish is that this whole understanding in terms of strategy from that side to this side, and strategic management or leading strategy towards managing things and managing of strategy is gets embedded in our thought process at the end of the day. I will be catching up back with you. Till then, goodbye.